Hello and welcome back. This time we're talking about pacing. Now pacing can be genre dependent, but the fast and slow parts do have a pattern. The ebb and flow is created by following every action scene with a follow-up scene. And the follow-up scene is where the character takes time to process what happened during the action scene, physically or emotionally. These scenes also give the reader a chance to process and a chance to bond with the character. The follow-up scene is slower. They could be a page or two that happens in the same place as the action scene, where the characters discuss what went wrong and plan their next move. Or it could happen in a different setting altogether. The point is that the novel should slow down before it builds back up to the next action scene. Sometimes the author will write follow-up scenes using longer sentences to slow the reader down, and action with short sentences to create that faster pace. This is a great way to create the impression of undulation. Other times, authors will stick with short sentences, but use backstory, emotions, setting descriptions, and dialogue to slow it down. Assessing pace involves some instinct. Now, if you get bored or you can't keep up, then the reader won't either. It's best to point out where things are too slow and simply make a suggestion to cut the scene down to the essentials. Or if it's too fast, suggest adding a short follow-up scene or even a break in the action. Having the main character deal with the wound, assess the situation, and make a new plan are great ways to slow pacing for a few moments within the action scene. The main character shouldn't be out of the action too long though, as the reader wants them to be in the fray, and sidelining the main character makes it feel like they aren't actively trying to accomplish anything. If the main character is unconscious while other things are going on, then the scene should be from someone else's perspective in first and close or distant third. Omniscient is different, and the narrator can move from following one person to another person seamlessly. In first or third, for example, a side character can see the main character fall in battle. Of course, this character is going to try to get to them as soon as possible and get them to a safe place for them to heal, and the reader gets to be let in on what happens while they are out. The main character should still get back into the action quickly. Now, having a few scenes or a chapter from someone else's perspective works for making that person the most important side character. Keeping the main character out can frustrate the reader or lose them altogether if it isn't done well. Something else that will frustrate the reader is boring content. If it's boring to you, it will be boring to the reader. A too slow pace usually happens when chunks of backstory are told to the reader or long places of setting are described. But we also need to take into account genre expectations when it comes to pacing. In literary fiction, it's going to be slower, with longer backstory and setting descriptions and less action. For fantasy, we're going to want a sense of grandeur to come through, so setting is going to be highlighted between the action scenes. Crime stories will involve some description to get to the small clue left under the keyboard while leaving the baby blue wallpaper and shag carpet out of it. Now, historical romance, there are going to be a lot of descriptions of clothing and setting. It's expected by the reader, and dialogue will comprise a lot of the action. Sci-fi can have setting described through the characters' actions and what they see and hear going on all around them. They will have longer action scenes like fantasy. Now, these aren't the only ways that genres can be written, but there are some guidelines for reader expectations. During editing, make sure all action scenes have follow-up scenes, and if they don't, mark them and just leave a note to add a follow-up scene. Also note where there's a long action scene with no breaks, and see where you can add one or two recovery scenes / follow-up scenes. You want the ebb and flow feeling throughout the manuscript. You also want to watch for places where the main character is sidelined, and note if it feels too long and it's not from another character's perspective. Look for places where non-essential setting descriptions can also be cut for better pacing. Let the reader's imagination fill in the rest. And remember to mark the sections of long backstory and look for places where that can be filled in through the varying techniques of flashbacks, dialogue, and internal thoughts. Pacing also involves cliffhangers and chapter hooks, which will be covered in the next lesson. See you there!